All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are going to get into talking about the Sunday night game between the 49ers and the Cowboys. So, both teams not playing like they have in years past. The Cowboys, they were coming in at 3-3, Niners at 3-4, and they were at this point, or at that point before the game, they were in last place in the division, in their own division, which is shocking. But I mean, the division is still very close. But it's just when you hear that and you don't take into account any context, you just wouldn't expect that. But the 49ers did what they always do, and that's now the game got close, but the 49ers did what they usually do, and that's beat the Cowboys, and they continued that here, winning 30-24. And they were without Brandon Ayuk, of course, because now, unfortunately, he's out for the year with the torn ACL. Juwan Jennings did not play in this game either. Deebo Samuel did play, had a 66-yard touchdown, get called back, but also got banged up once again in this game, dealing with the wrist, just getting over, dealing with pneumonia, and then now he's dealing with the rib injury. But thankfully, the Niners are going into their bye, so hopefully he'll be healthy out of the bye. George Kittle continues his solid year. He's been great. Had another touchdown in this game. Jordan Mason got banged up in this game. So the Niners had to rely on Isaac Guerendo, who had that big run against Seattle at the end of the game a few weeks back. Even with the injury to Mason, the Niners still ran the ball for over 200 yards. They had 223 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, one by Guerendo and one by Brock Purdy, who was solid, 18-26, 260 yards, 1 touchdown, no pick, was sacked 10 times, was sacked 2 times. Sorry, if you sacked 10 times, yeah, Niners are probably not winning. George Kittle, like I said, he was great. 6 receptions, 128 yards, 1 touchdown. Deebo had 4 for 71. Ricky Pearsall made some good catches, 4 receptions for 38 yards. He's going to be more involved in this offense. He's going to have some big games. And once they get Juwan Jennings back, that's another weapon to add. And don't look now, but Christian McCaffrey could be coming back in Week 10, which would be such a huge boost for this team. The Niners defense actually only had 2 sacks in this game. And then for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, 25 of 38, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. They actually elevated Dalvin Cook to the active roster. There was no Rico Dowdle. So you had Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott. And if you had this backfield a few years ago, be the best backfield in the NFL. But Zeke actually had some good runs, but I mean, he only ran the ball for 34 yards. Had a touchdown in this game. Dalvin Cook only had 6 receptions or 6 carries for 12 yards. Kavontae Turpin, he had 1 for 11. CeeDee Lamb, best game of the season, and he was stressing me out for my fantasy matchup. Thankfully, I still won, but it was like such a seesaw of a matchup because CeeDee had a couple of he had some nice catches in this game. The touchdowns he was wide open on, but he had some nice catches. Then all of a sudden, Kittle scores his touchdown. Deebo made a couple of plays. Brock Purdy has the rushing touchdown. I was sitting good. I was looking great, and then all of a sudden, CeeDee has those 2 touchdowns where he was wide open, and then the matchup was so close once again, but thankfully I was able to escape with the victory. But yeah, he had 13 receptions for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Tolbert, 3 for 44. Jacob Ferguson had 6 for 23. Cowboys defense, 2 sacks in the game. Aubrey only had 1 field goal attempt, and of course he made it. But the Cowboys dropped to 3-4. Niners improved to 4-4 on the season. So yeah, they punted on their first drive. The Cowboys, Niners went down the field. Purdy connected with Deebo Samuel for 47 yards, and that led to a Carlson 50-yard field goal. So that made it 3-0. And then Dak Prescott threw an interception. He was trying to hit Turpin, and that got intercepted. And the Niners actually didn't turn that into any points. The Cowboys actually were leading. They put together an 11-play, 65-yard drive down the field, and Ezekiel Elliott from 1 yard outscored. So that made it 7-3. Niners turned it over on downs. Purdy on 4th and 3 tried to hit Deebo, and it was behind Deebo. He was wide open on the play, but Purdy did not make a good pass there. But like I said, there was a 66-yard touchdown earlier in that drive by Debo, but that ended up getting called back. And I really could have used that in one of my other fantasy leagues. I ended up going 3-2 on the week, but maybe I could have went 4-1 had that touchdown happen. But listen, I can't be greedy. So, yeah, they turned it over in downs. The Cowboys then turned that into a field goal. Aubrey kicked a 29-yard field goal. Niners then responded. Carlson kicked a 44-yard field goal on their drive to answer that. So that made it 10-6, and that's what the score was at the half. But then in the fourth quarter, the Niners took over. They put together a 5-play, 60-yard drive down the field, set up by a 43-yard reception by George Kittle, and then Guerrero took it from 40 yards out, and that made it 13-10. Then Dak Prescott threw another pick. It was a great play by Lenore, and the Niners turned that into a touchdown drive. That was the George Kittle 2-yard touchdown reception, which we thought it was going to get called back, but it ended up not. So, yeah, that made it 20-10. Cowboys punted again, and then yet another touchdown by the Niners. You had a 16-yard scramble by Purdy, a 27-yard reception by Kittle, 16 yards to Deebo Samuel, and eventually they got down to the 2, and Brock Purdy scored on a quarterback sneak from 2 yards out. So that made it 27-10. And like I said, I was looking good in my fantasy matchup at that point, and I thought, all right, just as long as CD doesn't do anything in this fourth quarter, we'll be good. But he scored 2 touchdowns. So the Niners punted, and then Cowboys put together a touchdown drive. Dak connected with CeeDee Lamb for a 7-yard touchdown, so that made it 27-17. And then Ricky Pearsall had a 39-yard run, and that led eventually to another Carlson field goal from 41 yards out. So that made it 30-17. And then you had 29 yards to CeeDee Lamb, and then eventually another 20 to him for the touchdown. So that made it 30-24. The Niners ended up punting back to the Cowboys, but they got nothing going on that drive, and the Niners ended up getting a first down with Guerrero on 3rd and 2, and they ended up winning the game and improved to 4-4 in the season. And then they go into their bye, and then they come out taking on a banged-up Buccaneers team. But they got a tough schedule coming up, the Niners, and I've gone over it a bunch of times. But, yeah, at Tampa, home against Seattle, at Green Bay, at Buffalo against the Bills on Sunday night. That's on December 1st. Really looking forward to that game. Bills, they're rolling right now. Home against the Bears, home against the Rams, at the Dolphins with Tua now, home against the Lions, and then at the Cardinals. So that's a really tough schedule coming up. Cowboys, they dropped to 3-4. They're at the Falcons next week, which is a tough game, but definitely winnable. Falcons coming off a big win, but they are just inconsistent. Then you got the Eagles at home, Texans at home, at the Commanders, home against the Giants on Thanksgiving, home against the Bengals, at the Panthers, home against the Bucs, at the Eagles, and then home against the Commanders. So tough games in there as well for the Cowboys. And, they're third in the NFC East. And right now, in terms of the wild card, the Cowboys are 2 games back. Niners are a game and a half back. So, yeah. We're at the halfway point in the season. And look, the Cowboys, they just continue to not run the football well. Their defense just has not been great this year. It just hasn't. I mean, even with the injuries they're dealing with, it hasn't been great. Even with the Niners struggling, they still found a way to win this game. They dominated the third quarter, and thankfully they did, because then, the Cowboys, they did make things a little bit interesting at the end, but, the Niners were able to hold them off and get the win here. A much-needed win for them after the debacle against the Chiefs, where just everything went wrong. But now you might be getting reinforcements on the offensive side of the ball, and then soon after that, maybe you get Ufunga back, you get Dre Greenlaw back. Things could definitely turn around for the 49ers. And also, hopefully you get Jake Moody back soon. So, you lose Brandon Ayuk for the season, but I feel like the Niners, and he really wasn't doing anything before that. So, you get Pearsall now in the fold, and Jawan Jennings comes back, and you get McCaffrey. Offensively, the Niners should be okay. And Brock Purdy, he's had a good year. I know last week against the Chiefs was not great by any means, but, he's been solid this year. So, hopefully that continues. You just got to get the defense healthy. That's the other thing. If you get Dre Greenlaw back, Ufunga back, it's possible that maybe they could go out and trade for somebody. I know my friend mentioned to me while we were on our trip that, Maybe there could be a reunion with DeForest Buckner if the Colts decide to sell. And that would be big because they already lost Javon Hargrave. And, getting Buckner back and putting him right there in the middle of the defense, that'd be great. I think they also miss Eric Armstead. I feel like they should have tried to work something out with him to keep him. But you know what? The Niners got it done. And this division, it's very close. And now, when we come back from our final break, we'll talk about another team in their division that looks like they're back after the performance on Thursday. The NFC West it's tough right now. It's a very competitive division. Who's going to come out on top? So they needed that win. The Cowboys, we'll see what happens. But, I right now I would lean towards them not making the playoffs. And, there were some things you liked, of course, with them. There's some positives maybe that you could take away, but it's just more of the same, against the Niners. Dak turns the ball over against them, and then they tried to come back, but it was too little too late. But, CeeDee Lamb had a big game, so hopefully that's something you could take, and he just continues that production, has a monster second half. Because he's going to need to if the Cowboys are going to want to turn their season around and make the playoffs. So, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I think with how Washington is playing, them being in first place, the Eagles look like they're starting to build momentum. You got all the NFC North teams. Now you got the NFC West teams. There's just a lot of teams that the Cowboys are going to have to deal with. And then you got, the two teams in the South with the Bucs and the Falcons. But now it looks like the Falcons, they've taken a stronghold on the division with their win in Tampa. And we'll talk about that game as well. At some point this week. But it's just, there's a lot of teams the Cowboys are going to have to deal with, and there's just a lot of teams that are better than the Cowboys right now. So, and the Niners, it's not like this win guarantees the Niners anything, but they could build momentum. And if they can come out of the bye, you get Juwan Jennings back, you get Christian McCaffrey back, your offense is basically almost at full strength. You're just not going to get Brandon Ayuk back. So, the defense is definitely that's the side of the ball that I would be more concerned with for the Niners. And I think that's something that I brought up on the show multiple times. So, but they get the win. They improve to 4-4 to get back to 500. Cowboys drop to a game under. Niners go into the bye, and hopefully they get some more guys back, including McCaffrey. So we're going to take our final break of the show now. When we come back, we'll talk about the other team in the NFC West, the Rams, picking up a big win over the Vikings. We'll talk about that game when we return from our final break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.